Hi, everyone. So today on the podcast, we have the lovely Jennifer Shyrock on the show. She's a certified dog behavior consultant and the owner of Family Paws. She served as board member of the International Childbirth Education Association. She's a mother. She's a former special education teacher and she's got a degree in special education as well. So welcome, Jennifer, on to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun talking to you because I think this is such an important topic always at the moment. So, do you want to tell us a little bit how you got into what you do?
Sure.
Yeah, what made you decide to go into your niche?
Well, I always loved dogs, and so I grew up showing and training dogs. So I grew up with Cavalier King Charles Spaniels and Golden Retrievers, but I had a passion for German Shepherds from a very early age. I wanted a shepherd. I wanted to make my dogs shepherds, which is, I just love German Shepherds.
Yeah.
But then when I was, I taught and did all that stuff before I had my children. And then when I was home, we decided to get a German Shepherd, of course. And we went to German Shepherd Rescue and we said we wanted a puppy. And they said, no, you have a 3-year-old, 2-year-old. That's not a good idea. So they were really wise about that. And we ended up with this gorgeous 4-year-old German Shepherd named Moose. And I got involved with German Shepherd Rescue. I volunteered and ended up fostering for them and ended up doing their voice line. And just so many phone calls came in about people expecting a baby and they didn't know what to do. And they had this big dog and they were scared. And at the same time, I was volunteering with a welcome baby program. So I was going into people's homes to support new moms. And they had dogs, right? And they didn't know what to do. And I saw this need. And I just thought, maybe there's a niche that needs to be filled. And so I started my journey in the dog behavior consulting. And then, I started Dogs and Storks in 2002. Family Paws started. And then people started asking me questions and wanted the program out there. And so that's kind of how it all started. It just, there was a need and there continues to be a strong need.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, definitely. We run puppy classes and other classes here, but it's something we get asked all the time. It is, and it's so important, right? Because the dog in the home with the family and the interactions are like very important for everybody involved.
Sure.
But have you noticed that some breeds sort of struggle more with children versus other breeds? Like, I mean, we've all seen on social media people recommending like nanny dogs, like how pit bulls might have been bred for nanny dogs or the typical golden retriever family dog. But what's your take on that?
I really like to look at the individual dog and how they do within the family. So I've seen all types of breeds do well with children. And, to me, it's about the individual dog and how they are adjusting to life with the child and the preparation that the family does, so it's not so much to me about the breed. I would say some breeds are going to be higher energy and harder to maintain, in a home. You get a border collie and people are unexpected. I just got a consult today with someone who has a 4-month-old border collie and children, and they're going, oh my gosh, we don't know what we got into. That's a concern when people aren't researching the breed and what the breed tendencies tend to be. So I think it's really important to pay attention to it, but it's really important to look at the individual dog and how the family's needs and family's ability to meet the need of the dog, how they mesh together. It's really important.
Yeah. And you just saying like 2 of my dogs are border collies actually, and one he loves people and he's fine with children. And I don't have children and I'm very much in the dog world. So not really my enemy. My friends have children. So I don't have children coming to the house or anything like that. So
Right.
but he's fine. But my younger border collie, because she's been startled by children before, I've done a little bit of socializing with her when she was a puppy, but it's not enough. If I ever had kids or anything, I'd have to probably do a lot of work, I think,
Sure.
because she's quite afraid and she would do that typical kind of collie kind of thing. So So yeah, so I think what you say about the individual dog and their personality and stuff is, yeah, really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, it really makes a big difference, and paying attention to that and trying to meet the needs of the dog in front of you is super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And is
And
that,
then,
oh, sorry, go on.
sorry, Chantal.
No, 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 go.
Have you noticed any differences in the bite statistics? Right? Because that's what people also care about between different breeds and children, boys, girls, ages, people.
Well, they definitely say that boys tend to get bitten more, and the ages are usually younger, and 77% of the dog bites are from a family dog or a known dog, right? But bite stats are interesting because they're really difficult to get, because we're still, the jury's out on what truly is a bite in some circumstances, so and documentation is inconsistent. So it's really kind of frustrating, but it's definitely with the younger boys, they tend to be the ones that get bitten. That's what statistically they say. Yeah.
Mm. And I find as well, so clients, when they phone me with this kind of problem, very few actually phone up about, when they are pregnant and they need to prep their dog for a
Right.
baby. Most of my clients phone me when the dog has already bitten their toddler 3 times or something, and
Oh
and then
no,
all of a
yeah.
sudden it's a massive problem. So, but do you find, with obviously you being head of Family Paws, do you find that owners come to you and they're more kind of educated
Yeah.
in that sense? And then
Well, we definitely get a lot of people who are coming to us from other trainers and veterinarians, but my goal is that we get people who come to us prior to having their baby. That's the goal. That's really why I started Dogs and Storks, was to get it out there and have it be a program in the communities, so that people just naturally saw this presentation and said, oh yeah, I need to do that. But unfortunately, we're still a long way from people, realizing that they need to get the education prior to having a baby. And so unfortunately, we end up with those situations that I think are really preventable. I
Yeah.
think most situations with dogs and toddlers where there's bites are preventable. It's unfortunate when it happens. And, I think with more information and education, I think as a profession, we can do more to get information out there. And that's my goal. That's
Yeah.
total, to prevent those situations. Because
Mm.
once you lose that trust, it's so hard to get it back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of clients seem to kind of find the baby phase quite easy because the baby's always picked up, the baby doesn't move around and stuff. And then I get the call when the baby's 9, 10 months or so, or, up from about then, when they start to crawl and they start grabbing the dog. And then the owners
Absolutely.
can't understand why their dogs are growling because the child is in the dog's bed and things. And it's just managing those expectations and things as well.
Yeah, our goal is really to get the information out there so people are thinking 3 to 6 months ahead of time, and then they're planning and adjusting with their dog to some of the changes that are going to be required. So for example, they have gates set up, they have management in place, they prepare, because you get the call once there's a problem, and once there's a problem, it's really hard to undo what they've seen. And once there's been a bite, it's really, really difficult for parents to get their trust back with the dog. And then we end up in, unfortunate situations like rehoming or even behavioral euthanasia, which is really sad. So it's so important that we get this information out ahead of time.
I know that actually brought back a memory for me. I just remembered that as a kid, I was actually bit by my grandma's dog.
Oh, wow.
But it
Wow.
was my fault. Yeah, actually, I remember that now. I remember I was pulling on her tail, obviously, and it was just a moment, because normally I remember my grandparents and my parents were very good at telling me not to do it. But obviously, that one moment it happened. But I think, my parents and everybody, we weren't very educated about dogs. I'm the first one in the family that really, knows a bit more or has learned a bit more. But even then, it was never like, they never blamed the dog, even in that circumstance, because they knew, I was the one sort of I kind of caused that, and just avoid me doing that again, and we'll all be good, pretty much. Yeah.
Times have changed a little bit, that the blame
Yeah.
tends to go to the dog, and now the dog is
Yeah.
responsible and it's the dog's fault and everything else. And we
Yeah.
need to go back to, we have to be modeling appropriate interaction and everything from an early age. And one of the reasons I love this age group is that babies are sponges. They take in so much. So what we model, if we teach our families when they're expecting about body language, and we teach them about,
Yeah.
appropriate interaction, they can model that for their child. And we actually create a dog aware generation, which is what my goal is. I really want that information, so for example, if we have a family who's, they're used to giving their dogs hugs and kisses, if we are working with them while they're expecting, we can talk about, well, that might not be the affection and you want to give in front of your child. We can talk about that. We can also say, look at, does their dog really enjoy that interaction? And we can look for other ways to interact that are going to be more kid friendly and safe, versus having them stumble upon that. So, because again, but unfortunately, times have changed a little bit. Like you, if I got hurt or bitten, it was always my fault, right? As a kid.
Yeah.
But now times are changed, that the dog doesn't get a second chance and the dog is blamed, and it's really turned. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what's caused it to turn so much, but we need to really account and be responsible for what we know and how we're, engaging with dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as well, it's that expectation that humans have of especially dogs that they don't know as well. Like, so for example,
Yeah.
like I do search and rescue training with my dogs. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a load of children that came to be like missing persons. And I had my male border collie and I had my little Pomeranian puppy. So you can imagine the Pomeranian puppy gets so much attention, and he's very like,
Sure.
he's very people sociable and he loves saying hello. But like at one point, I just turned my back and I just had him out, just like so he could just sniff and everything before he started his trail. And I was just rooting around in my van, getting stuff out. And then there was a load of children with their mothers, like so they were like with their parents, and they just kind of descended on my Pomeranian. And the mothers are just there laughing and filming their children, right? And they're going to grab Stewie, my puppy, and like they chase it and him. And I was just like, no, 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 guys, no, this is not how we interact with like dogs that you don't know.
Right.
Because he was quite overwhelmed, and he came up to me and he just like lifted up a paw and he was like, guys, this is too much now, and it's like I could just see that. But it was the fact that the adults had no idea that their children were so overbearing towards my puppy. They just found it funny, and they were just like videoing their children like chasing this puppy. And I was just like, I was quite amazed actually.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. Everybody's capturing everything on video and they're not looking at what they're really seeing, so we can supervise very dangerous situations if we don't know what we're looking at. I talk about the 4 pillars of dog aware, looking at body language, sensitivities, proximity, and supervision. And you can't really supervise unless you're familiar with body language, unless you're really familiar with a dog. You can't know a dog's sensitivities unless you know their body language, what they're telling you. And then proximity, in that situation, you need to know about proximity and how comfortable a dog is. And again, you can't have supervision without having those 3 things. You need to have those 3 things in order to properly supervise. And that's something that we talk about. So, I talk about the 4 pillars of dog aware being those 4 things. And it's so important. It's so incredibly important because social media is another thing. Everybody wants to capture that cute moment. And in that moment, we often see that it's not cute when you look at it,
Yeah.
We need to put our phones down.
Yeah, definitely. I find that. And I find people as well just don't have that awareness of that body language as well, because they quite often don't see all the micro signals leading up to a potential bite. So yeah, I mean, even on this same day, my male border collie who loves people, he had found this 12-year-old boy, and this 12-year-old boy's tugging with him and he's having a great time, and like the mother had wandered off like, doing something. So I was keeping my eye on this boy in spirit, my dog, the whole time. And he tugged with him all the way back to the car, and he's like, "Oh, your dog's so amazing, I love him." And then at the very last minute he just bent right over him and just gave him a big kiss
Yes.
on the nose. And I was like, and for a split second Spirit just froze, and I just saw the whites of it. But then he was like, "Oh, cool. Can I put my tongue on your face too then?" And then he was like, whereas if that had been my young border collie, oh my gosh, she would have just, I don't know what she would have done. And again, it's just those little things that, they just, again, it's that assumption that all dogs are friendly and all dogs want to be kissed and stroked. And
Right. Well, it's that expectation, right? And I always talk about women when they're pregnant, right? Someone coming up to them with their pregnant belly and feeling they can touch them. My hair being white and growing up with white hair, everybody would come up and pet me and touch my hair. Yes. And, and it's, people feel that they're entitled to that with dogs just because they're 4 legs, furry, and tail. We need to change that opinion in the, all over the world, really, that dogs need their space, and we need to respect their space, and we need to invite them. And it's okay if they opt out. It's really okay. But that changing that, I struggle with this in my own neighborhood when I walk our dogs. It's, my collie is not necessarily, she's okay, but she hasn't grown up in a household. My kids are older now, so she's not familiar with small children as much other than seeing them. And so she's a little uncomfortable. And so we talk about blowing a kiss or waving or, throwing a treat. She'll sit, asking her to sit, and then they can throw a treat to her or something like that. But it's that expectation that all dogs need to be pet and want to be pet. And we have to change that. That's what our program is about as well, too, is really looking at the expectations that are placed on these dogs. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot on a good day. And it's a lot, it doesn't mean it's a bad dog. It just means we need to respect boundaries. And that has to be the norm, not the exception.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah,
Frustrating.
Yeah, no, I always say I think if I were a dog, I probably already would have bit someone because they're more tolerant. I am.
I'll tell you, I'll tell the story. I mean, again, because I've always had this white hair and people would want to touch it. I remember being at a water fountain. I was having a really bad day and I was just getting a drink, and someone came up and was petting my hair while I'm taking a drink at a water fountain. And is this real? And I turned around and yanked her hair and said, "Is yours?" I just said, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. I was, because I was just, this was years and years and years and years ago, and in my 20s. And it just was, come on. And that's dogs, I don't necessarily want to be touched. I don't want people touching me. And our dogs only have body language to say that. It's only that. So
absolutely. I mean, I
my
get
bike moment.
I get uncomfortable in queues, especially airports and things. It drives me mad. People I find just go up right behind me, and so I actually use my suitcase as a barrier to keep people away from me. So I can't imagine to have someone just touching your hair. That's just so weird.
No, I've had people follow me and touch me, and and so I really relate to the whole dog thing, because I just absolutely, and again, when you're pregnant, people think that they can come up and touch your belly and things like that, and it's no, this is not an invite to you. This is my personal space. It's interesting the expectations people have, isn't it?
Yeah, and how they've shifted. So strange, actually. But
I've never told that story before on a podcast, but
I love it. It's amazing. I can't believe people do that.
Don't touch Jen's hair.
Yes, that's the title of the podcast.
Yeah.
Jen bites back.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's true. We all have our limits, and I think we need to allow for dogs to have their limits too. And not label them then as a bad dog. And I think a lot of times if people say, my dog would prefer to show tricks versus your child petting them, people will think, well, what's wrong with your dog? And, I'm hoping that in time that changes, that people will naturally know, but again, I think people just really put a lot of expectation on our dogs.
Yeah, I
Don't put
agree.
that expectation on cats, I can assure you.
No,
Yeah.
or other people, or
Yeah.
other people. Yeah,
Right,
I
right.
wonder if it comes from films like Lassie and Disney films, where everyone lives happily ever after and that kind of thing. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, it definitely is a part of it. And then I also think right now social media is terrible. I mean, I must get sent hundreds of videos where there's, interactions and things that I wouldn't encourage, but people get away with it and therefore they show it, and then it starts to be, this is a good idea. And images are really important. I know that, like I said, when I was president of German Shepherd Rescue, and I would get, we would get feedback from our families after they adopted a dog. And I remember someone sending a picture of their dog with their baby, and they were laying side by side. And I thought, oh, that's so cute. And so I posed my daughter in that same kind of position, again, before I knew and before I specialized in this, but images are powerful.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful as dog lovers what images we're putting out there, because people will copy what you do. And we have to be mindful of that. And so social media has, made it really, really easy for people to think some of this interaction is safe and acceptable and what you should be doing with dogs.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually doing a webinar on dog body language for some dog daycare staff. We were training them up on body language, and I was actually looking at the stock images because I was looking for happy dogs, anxious dogs. It's actually quite shocking how much of the stock images the dogs just look stressed and shut down and anxious and stuff. And these are, and there's kids grabbing the dogs and restraining them and that kind of thing. And it's just, yeah, again, it was quite shocking.
What's interesting too is that in many of those images, you see the child is unhappy as well. So you can see the child pulling back, and you can see, especially infants and toddlers, you can see that they're uncomfortable. Yeah. And so we have to pay attention not only to the dog, but I think to the child. And I think a lot of parents want their child to love dogs. And if a parent is a dog lover, they have this expectation that their child should love dogs too. And we have to allow for kids to be their individual selves as well. And some of them, may be sensitive to saliva or the licking of a dog or the smell of a dog or the fur of the dog or just that kind of sensitivity. And the parent might have the expectation that they have to pet the dog and engage with the dog. And I see children that are, definitely not comfortable with that. And we have to allow for that as well, and not as a dog lover or dog owner take it personally if a child doesn't want to engage or interact with our dog, so it's a lot of expectations all around.
Yeah. And then prevention is always better than cure, but what advice do you normally give people prepping for a baby? I recently had a client also, she's just had her baby a little while ago, but I mean, for weeks and weeks beforehand, they were getting their Australian Shepherd ready for the baby. And even now, they are so strict with the interactions and the training that they still continue and everything. But what would you say to our listeners? How do you prep for a baby?
The most important thing, I think, is to prepare your dog for the separation that's going to be needed. I think a lot of dogs aren't used to being separated with a barrier, a gate, an X-pen, a play yard, that kind of thing. And, we may not need it necessarily in the infant stage. We might be able to use, something like an indoor tether during the infant stage, but we need to be able to separate. And that's a big change for dogs, and so we need to be able to prepare for that toddler time. And I like it to be gradual. So, I always talk about management, having success stations set up and prepared ahead of time so that it's not a shock to the dog, because when you have a baby, you need to be able to separate your dog at different times. You're going to be doing tummy time on the floor, and your dog may think, oh, yay, we're on the floor, it's playtime. And, they may not understand that that is not a time that you want them to come over. So we have to teach these things ahead of time and allow for our dog to learn and come along with the learning, right? Instead of crash course, all of a sudden we're going to put you behind a gate and, oh, well, it's really, really important to teach these things ahead of time. The other thing is getting to know body language and knowing your dog. I can't emphasize the importance of that. And know body language and know it more. I think I'm always learning. Every dog is teaching me new body language and teaching me how they use the same body language and that other dogs use. And that allows people to see the predictability of dogs. I think learning about body language helps relieve fear for people because, there is some predictability to when we see a dog licking their lips, turning away, whale eye, half moon eyes, those kinds of things. And if we help them to learn that ahead of time, we're doing a lot, to help towards success. Yeah. So those are two really important things that I think about.
And do you find, so again, when I've had clients for this kind of issue, I find as well the dog's needs just aren't being met either as well from because I think of time and just how tiring motherhood is and how busy it is. So how important is, obviously management is super important in teaching those skills, but also how important is it for the dog that their needs are still being met?
It's really important that we're still meeting the needs. Now, it may look different. Right? It may look different and timing may look different, but we still want to have ongoing activities and games and things like that. So we really try to weave that in with the preparation, so what does that look like? We can have relaxation time, we can have play time, we can have, game time and, but it's very hard for everybody to meet those needs in the beginning, especially with a newborn, and especially if the family mother, if they're a breastfeeding family, we need to allow for people to have that time to adjust and bond with their baby. And that's why we recommend that they set up outside options like get a dog walker, a pet sitter. They go to doggy daycare if they've got an appropriate doggy daycare near them, would have alternatives to meet their dog's needs, so that they can also meet their own needs too, because it's a lot. It's a lot of change. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And are there any specific skills that you would teach a dog before the baby arrives? So you mentioned things like success station. Is there any kind of real go-to skills that, the dogs need?
I love touch cue. I think it's really important to have a dog know touch cue and be able to move a dog with touch. In a lot of ways. I love a dog that can go to their place on cue, send them to place and have them think it's a fun, relaxing thing and stay there for a little bit. Really important. I think we have to teach upstairs and downstairs and, goofy things that for safety, that the dog waits until, because you don't want to be knocked down when you're carrying a baby. So, in my house, I had 4 large dogs and it was, I want you to wait at the top of the stairs until, or I send them down first. So go down and then I'll come down, because I didn't want them to rush me down the stairs. So I would send them down and then send them up and that kind of thing. So different things, but livability, and that looks different in each home, right? So it looks different to each family. But to me, those are some of the basic things that I really can to be able to, we want them to be able to also walk with a stroller if that's what's going to be needed. Every family has different needs regarding that. Not all dogs need to walk with a stroller. They might have the outside opportunity, but that's something that we can teach ahead of time and things like that. But yeah, drop it, leave it, those kinds of things, really important to have on board. Yeah.
And do you desensitize the dogs to baby sounds and things like that as well before? Oh,
such a complicated question. So I've got different opinions about this because you can play baby sounds all day long. And this, I base this on my voicemail. I have a voicemail, a dog and baby support line. And what people will say is, we did everything. We played baby sounds. We brought the blanket home. And I feel horrible for them because they did what they felt was the right thing to prepare. But when you play those baby sounds, you don't have the whole picture. When a baby cries, it actually triggers lactation in the mom. It actually triggers a cascade of hormones. It triggers a different response. You can't simulate that. So I want the families to learn what their dogs look like when they're curious. I say, expect your dog is going to be inquisitive about the baby cry and the baby sound. So I like to play all different types of sounds, kittens crying, meowing, and cows mooing, and all these different sounds, and help them get prepared to recognize their dog when they're curious and they're inquisitive, and then send their dog to a different place, or have the goal, I see you, go to your mat. I see you, go get your ball. I see, so that's what we to do. I like to recommend that. So you can, because unfortunately playing baby sounds doesn't necessarily equal what people are expecting it to do, because every infant cry is different and unique, and you put the infant with the person, and now you have this whole package of stimuli, which is becomes complicated versus it being as simple as just playing baby sounds. Now I use the actual baby cry when we have a dog that is not adjusting. Then I might use the actual baby cry once baby's there to do more desensitization and that kind of thing. So, and if the dog is staying at someone else's place, we might send the actual baby scent and baby cry so that the dog can get, we can use baby's name and do all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said about the dogs being curious and getting the owners to look out for that body language.
Right.
That's really
right. Because if they first see their dog react, right, they think, oh no, and they can go to a scary place. And we want them to realize, it's normal, and your dog is going to be inquisitive, and this is what we want to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever had any dogs that are quite prey driven towards the baby? The reason why I ask is when I first started doing dog training years ago, and when the woman phoned me, I thought, no, I'm not experienced enough to take this case. But she had a Jack Russell that was literally every time the baby cried. So that just reminded me of you talking about baby sounds. And everything. Every time the baby cried or whined or moaned, the Jack Russell would go into prey drive mode. Do you see a lot of that?
I see it with, I can say I've had 2 clients where I was absolutely, by 3 months, the dog hadn't acclimated at all, hadn't habituated. And, it was really clear that this was more a predatory kind of thing. And we suggested alternatives. But, it's funny you mentioned a Jack Russell, because I would say Jack Russells and Rat Terriers, that I see that more. Yeah, it's come up. But most of the time, dogs do, acclimate and habituate to the sounds. But there's the occasion where we do see more of that prey drive, and we have to pay attention to that, strong attention to it. And it doesn't change. It doesn't go away necessarily in those cases. And we have to make alternatives, But it's usually we can work it through, and it's not usually a predatory thing. So it's not all the time, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And then when do you normally is this one of the situations where you would advise, or kind of, I don't know what the word is, but rehome, bring up rehoming possibly to the parents? Do you have a lot of cases where that happens?
Unfortunately, we do see a lot of cases where, maybe the dog has been in the home for a period of time, and now they have a baby, and it's not going to work out, or it's not in the dog's best interest, or there's been an incident, So I do have cases like that. I tend to see really difficult cases, and sometimes it does come up that rehoming might be in the dog's best interest, because we see that they're so stressed in that environment. But we do have to get a veterinary behaviorist on board and try to go through all opportunities to work it out. But sometimes it is in the dog's best interest to not be in that environment. For some dogs, children are not their thing. For some people, children are not their thing. It's really hard to be in that environment and go through the toddler time. So unfortunately, I do see those cases. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what type of management do you really advise people to use? Obviously, it's very important, but how long should people use management, right? Is there a certain age where
Mm.
they can stop? We hear that a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. I still use management in my home. I use management all the time. I'm thinking about it now. My daughter's having a friend over this afternoon. I've got a golden and a collie, and they're both adolescent dogs. And, we'll still have management in place when she has a friend over because, I don't know that person's behavior around my dogs. And, so management is a safety. It's there also for the success of the dog. And so I think it's constantly something that we need to implement in a positive way. And so once taught in a positive way, it's there long term. But, when people will say, how long do we need to use these gates and how long do we need to do this? I don't have the answer for that because it's going to be individual with each family. And definitely during the toddler time, management is at its peak. It's at its height. But management comes into play when you have friends over, when you travel, when you go to different places. And so it's ideal, like having a nice place queue and all that stuff is really helpful. And being able to be crated or behind a gate is really important and helpful too.
Yeah. I do get clients all that say, because I think management is such an important go-to for anything with dog behavior, but especially with dogs and children, it's just like the most essential thing. But I get like some clients be like, okay, well, how long do I need this baby gate up for? Or, like they're like, oh, can I take it down in a few weeks kind of thing? And it's like,
right. We don't want to rush it. We don't want to rush it because especially during the toddler phase, we don't want to rush things because if we rush things and things fall apart, it's really difficult to get it back. It's really difficult to regain trust once something has happened. Once a parent has seen a dog growl or snap, it's very hard to regain that trust. And we don't want to have the child have that experience. I think it's really important that we think about that. Children at a young age still have sensitivities and still have emotions and that kind of thing. And I don't know, I don't want to create fear responses in children. And so it's really important that we pay attention to those things and use management in a positive way.
So you saying about that, I remember when I was really young, my cousin had this German Shepherd that was like working line German Shepherd and was really intense. And like and again, they didn't really know much about dogs, and you just talking about management and things. And like, I was terrified of this German Shepherd because I'm quite short person anyway. So as a child, I was really short.
Sure.
And and he would just stare at me. And so I'd be too scared to like go into the hallway, into the kitchen or anything. And I remember being out in the park once and I was running and then he started chasing me. And the adults were like, just keep still, keep still. And I'm thinking like, are you crazy? This dog's gonna like
Wow.
it's like, and just like thinking about it then, I just thought, like, obviously if it was my dog and what I know now, I would never put a child in that kind of situation.
It's
blasé about it. It was just so interesting. I was terrified of German Shepherds after that for a while. Like I was just like really scared of them.
Well, yeah, no, I saw a lot of those phone calls come into my voicemail, when I was involved with Shepherd Rescue. I mean, it's really important that we pay attention to how a child is responding and how the dog is responding. I think, infants and dogs are on the same playing field, that they don't have verbal communication. And so we need to pay attention to body language. And like I said, not all children want to be engaging with dogs. And we need to pay attention to that. And if a child is, kind of tightening up and pulling away, it's really important. So I'm a big fan of not having dogs lick babies in the face and, do those kinds of things, because that child is not able to communicate other than with body language how they're feeling. And we inadvertently, I think, and I don't know for sure, but anecdotally, don't want to create a fear response in a child early on in their development, to dogs.
Yeah.
So I really, really, really take it seriously. People want to bring home their infant and introduce it to the dog. And, we don't call, in Family Paws, we talk about homecoming period versus an introduction. So really it's the first 3 months that is a homecoming phase and a homecoming period where gradually we include the dog, and it's more parallel versus direct physical contact. And I think it's really important because so many people just want to put that dog and infant right close together.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's doing to the infant. When you think about, this is a predator. I mean, dogs are dogs, dogs are dogs, and we have to remember that. And so it's important to think about safety, but it's also important to think about the long-term effects that could happen. And just because an infant can't tell you I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean that they're not uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Again,
look at their body language.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was lucky. I don't really remember being scared after being bit. I think my parents had more of a pride, so I don't know if that's good or bad.
That's the parents. So when you witness a bite or something like that too, can also really, so for my parents who have witnessed something happening to their child, that really can carry on. So even and that fear can be passed down to the child and can lead to reactivity and that kind of thing. So and we really want to prevent things from happening like that.
Yeah. And then how do you normally help sort of kids scared of dogs? What do you do next?
Right. So it's important to help empower children. And the way that we can do that is teach them how to be doggy detectives, how to look at the ears, eyes, tail, muzzle, gather the clues to solve the puzzle, look at the whole body and practice with stuffed dogs and things like that. So looking at pictures and looking at their own dog and looking at other dogs and looking at pictures and giving them control over what they're seeing and what they choose to do with their body. So empowering them with the knowledge of when you see a lip lick or you see the ears do this, you can choose to do that. You can choose to be, stand like a tree or do something different, So it's important to work with the children that way, and, and empower them with the knowledge. I think when we know more, we feel less afraid.
Yeah. And I guess like probably slow is better than fast with the introductions. Go at the pace of the kid and the dog.
Right. There's no hurry when we talk about dogs in homes with children. There's no hurry. And I think that the hurry and the urgency is because people want to see that happily ever after. And there's such fear of things maybe not working out. There's this low level concern that dog and baby won't work out. And so when people see them close together, they think, oh, it's going great. It's good. And they convince themselves that. But we want them to really look at the whole picture and make sure that everybody's truly comfortable versus we're getting proximity, closeness. And so I know that was true for me. Like I wanted to be reassured. So when we see introductions, if you look at introductions online, you'll see that families want to introduce dog and baby, and they keep doing it. They keep saying, oh, go sniff, go sniff, go sniff. And they keep doing it and want to see that it's going to be okay. And really the relationship, what we're trying to educate about is it takes time, right? Time. So allow for the time. Don't rush it. There's no need to rush this.
Yeah. I think as well, we live in a society where we just want instant gratification. Everything, like in any industry you see it. And again, with any dog behavior problem, people just want things instantly.
They really want the quick fix. And this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
No, absolutely. And then on the other end of the spectrum, for kids that love to hug dogs and things, what kind of things would you do with those kinds of children? How would you educate them that touching and things isn't necessarily the best?
Yeah, this is where I really like to use stuffed dogs to really work with them to learn appropriate and more comfortable interaction. And this is where I think parents modeling appropriate behavior and interaction is really important. So we want, we don't necessarily need toddlers touching dogs, and in the home we can kind of, downplay that whole touching of the dog, but encourage blowing kisses for toddlers and things like that. We don't need to encourage them touching. We don't want to necessarily, as Madeline Gabriel talks about, magnetize the dog. We want to make sure that the child is, comfortable, but, respectful, of the dog. So we want to teach, that how to be friends, how to be friends with the dog, and that your friend may not like this kind of interaction, and, practice with the stuffed dogs. I have lots of those Melissa and Doug large dogs,
Yeah.
and practice with them appropriate interactions and things like that. That's
a really good idea.
really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the last question, which is also my favorite. If you had to recommend or name 3 things, or just, 3 things to make a dog happy, what would that be? What could people do or give or say or
Oh boy, wow, a full day. Let's see. A full pool of whipped cream. No, I'm kidding. I think about my dog and how much fun he would have with that.
Yeah, mine would love that too. I probably would be straight in there.
Well, I think consistency and predictability is really important for our dogs, for their health, mental health, and for their well-being. Enrichment. And then, those things, those consistency, predictability, and enrichment, and obviously caring for them in a way that they want us to care for them. So respecting their individuality, I can say it, individual self, those are the 3 things that I think are really, they might be 4. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Always more.
Yeah. I think it's
Perfect.
really important.
Yeah. Well, it's been so interesting chatting to you today.
Yeah.
So much. You brought up some really valid points and stuff. And yeah, I've learned a couple of things. So yeah, so thank you. It's been really, really good. Where can people find out more about you if they
can visit?
help with
Yeah, they can visit our soon to be new website at familypaws.com. So they can go there, and they can also visit us on Instagram at Family Paws Official.
Cool, perfect. And you do a lot of online work as well, don't you? So
yes. Yeah.
We'll make sure we stick those links up in the show notes. But yeah, thank you again. We've loved chatting to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been fun.